Hello, everyone, and welcome to this midweek edition of the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you, as always, by the GSMC Sports Network. My name, of course, is Christopher Shepard. Thank you guys yet again for tuning in for Wednesday's show. Happy Wednesday to you all. We have a very special edition of the pod. We are going to be talking about win projection totals. You guys love these segments, and this particular show should be no different. We're going to be looking at some SEC newcomers and some ACC stalwarts, kind of looking at how these two conferences are drastically different. Whereas we're going to be talking about some SEC newcomers, they're adding new blood. The ACC, on the other hand, just has two, maybe three this year big teams that really are the focal points of the entirety of the ACC. And I'm going to also talk about whether or not that's a good or bad thing for the actual conference itself. Before we get into any of that fun stuff, I do want to remind you guys that if you do feel so inclined, please like, follow, and subscribe to the show on the network. It is greatly appreciated by all involved. There are so many fantastic shows that go on here, and you should make yourselves available to all of them immediately. Everyone does a fantastic job. If you do feel so inclined as well, we also take any tips or donations. So if you do feel so inclined in this department, please leave them at the link at gsmc.cloud. It is a huge support to both me and my fellow podcasters and the network. All this information will change, as you might know, that I am becoming a live show. So you can make yourselves available also to YouTube's use of Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers. I'll explain them a bit more when we are live. But for now, gsmc.cloud is the way to go. And so, without further ado, let's jump right into today's show. Let's start off in the SEC. Like I said, two newcomers to the SEC, and let's start off with the one that's relatively weaker than the other, but still going to add a lot of verve and excitement to what the SEC is. And that team is, of course, the Oklahoma Sooners, my bitter rival. We do have to talk about them. Now, Oklahoma, like I said, isn't at the height of a Texas. We're going to talk about later when you think about teams coming in to the SEC and are expected to come into the SEC. Because after so many years of dominance at the key position with Lincoln Riley being the head coach, there seems to be a mindset shift. Brent Venables is the new coach now, and he's more of a defensive mind, and so that's where he places most of his focus. And as you can see on your screen, there are some new faces to this offense and just some really well-rounded receivers that I do like. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is there's a difference between Oklahoma and Texas. Oklahoma feels more like a Big 12 team at this moment in time, in that they're a well-rounded, solid team, but they're just competing to compete, whereas Texas seems like it's competing to win. But that being said, I'm still kind of looking forward to this new look Oklahoma, because if they are solid at best, then this Oklahoma team could shock many people. Because right now they're sitting at 7.6 projected wins, and I'm going to take the under on them. And here's why. In recent years, the thing that really carried Oklahoma, no matter who was playing at what skill position, the quarterback position was always settled, whether it be Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, and everyone knew their agenda. And everyone knew that Lincoln Riley was going to get the best out of them because, well, everyone calls him the quarterback whisperer. We've seen it now when he's gone to USC with Caleb Williams. We're going to have to see what he does with Miller Moss. But ever since Brent Venables came in, even though he had a guy like Dillon Gabriel, who's an outstanding quarterback in his own right in his entire college football career, the reason why I don't necessarily believe Oklahoma to be the QBU, if you so call it, anymore, is because this team doesn't seem predicated on building an offensive identity that allows the quarterback that much freedom anymore. I feel like Dillon Gabriel was an anomaly in the system, and Jackson Arnold, if you hear about what people have said about him coming out of high school, his first season starting for the Oklahoma Sooners, he doesn't necessarily seem to be someone who can work out of structure. That is, he seems to be someone rooted in pocket passing, rooted in timing, and so I'm not sure how he's going to fit with this Oklahoma setup. He does have some experienced receivers, and let's talk about them because the receivers are going to be what could carry this team to more wins than expected. Nick Anderson is a solid receiver, 10 touchdowns last year, 21 yards per reception as well. Very solid receiver, perhaps going to be their number one vertical threat, although he's a fantastic route runner in his own right. You have Jaleel Farouk, another explosive receiver, also very savvy route runner as well. But what I'm really focusing on right now is the offensive line on that side of the ball. The offensive line looks very stout, albeit very new. And working with Jackson Arnold is going to be kind of difficult as he is in his first season, like I said. And now that I think about it, this O-line certainly feels like where Brent Venables is placing a lot of value in his offense. Because the offensive line is like the defensive line for the offense. And they'll be tasked with making sure that Jackson Arnold is comfortable. They added Branson Hickman of SMU through the transfer portal. He had a very high PFF grade last year, 79.7. And I'm really excited to see how all of this gels together. Because the wide receivers, like I said, they're very well-rounded, solid players. But are they players who start for many SEC programs? And that's the difference. Meanwhile, if you look at the defense, they have top 10, top 5 units. Everyone in the field. They have a top 10 secondary. And Danny Stutzman leads a linebacking unit and is the focal point of this defense. AP All-American last year. And he is going to be the heartbeat of what makes Brent Venables' defense tick. He is a Brent Venables player through and through. And he's going to represent this Oklahoma team through defense. Now look at their schedule. Let's talk about that a little bit. Obviously, you have games that you expect Oklahoma to want to win. But there are a lot of games as well where Oklahoma might just be hoping to compete. And that won't necessarily be something that Oklahoma will want to pride itself on. Now, thinking about how the SEC is looking this year, where I can see about 4 to 5 teams potentially making the playoff. Oklahoma is in that group of teams in the SEC. Maybe not as low level as a Florida, perhaps. But Oklahoma is in that level of teams where this transitional period for them, it could hinder the overall outcome of what they do in this league, in this conference. And so, what I want to see from Oklahoma isn't necessarily wins that you wouldn't expect to see from them. I just want to see consistent play and improvement from Oklahoma if I'm an Oklahoma Sooners fan, which, of course, you know I'm not. But if I were, I just would want to see stability, improvement, investment on both sides of the ball by Brent Venables because Jackson Arnold does seem like he could be something for this offense. And so that's why I'm taking the under here. Because I don't necessarily view Oklahoma as a team that is on the precipice of something great. They are kind of in the middle. They're kind of working their way back to what they believe could be stability. I'm not saying that they aren't going to surprise a lot of people this season, but their time will come, if that makes sense. This season, though, doesn't look like it. They have the Red River rivalry right smack dab in the middle of the season, October 12th. And in recent past, they have gotten Texas' number. And the reason why is because that seems to be where a lot of their attention is focused on. Maybe Texas didn't necessarily care about the Red River rivalry as much, but look for them this year to care very deeply about this rivalry, especially because they feel that they deserve to win the SEC or at least compete in the SEC championship game. So that game could have a very different profile if Jackson Arnold doesn't, get his stuff together. Then, listen to this slate. They're at LSU and they're at Mizzou, November 9th. Those are games at the latter half of the season where you expect Oklahoma to put up points, right? Because LSU also has a couple questions. They have a fantastic receiving core, but can their guy Garrett Nussmeier, the new quarterback coming in with a fantastic bowl game last year really be the QB for them? If so, then LSU could easily win this game. At Death Valley is a very hard place to play, especially if you're a new SEC team, especially if you're a first-year starter like Jackson Arnold is. And then you're at Missouri, another tough place to play. A very well-rounded team that a lot of people have undervalued in recent past, but this could be their year where they break through and say, hey, we're a force to be reckoned with. So those are two games that Oklahoma should be penciling on their schedule as games where they feel they can compete, but I don't think they win those games. And to top it all off, even though it's at home, they have to play Alabama as well, the second to last week of the season. So, all in all here, this seems like a schedule where Oklahoma could have the opportunity to win some games that they don't necessarily feel like people think they can win, or it can all come crumbling down. I'm looking at the LSU and Missouri games to really track their progress, because they're kind of at the latter half of the season, but they're still kind of in the midst of when these teams are truly going to be competing for wins and when they're going to be competing for positioning, most importantly, in the top 25, especially in those top 12 rankings. And so, if Oklahoma can take advantage of that, that's a surprise, because at this point in time, they're no longer the favorites. They're out of the Big 12 now. But they still have the opportunity to play spoiler here. And that's a special thing. Especially for teams that, feel like they should be competing, but still have weaknesses to them that aren't as well-rounded as we think. So overall, if I'm betting on Oklahoma, I'm still taking the under. I still haven't seen enough of Jackson Arnold to have faith in them, and I still think this is going to be a team predicated heavily on its defense. However, all of these SEC teams are really going to be jostling for position, and they might get overconfident that they feel like they're in a position of strength, and Oklahoma can pounce. And I think that towards the latter half of the season, Oklahoma will really come into its own, and hopefully Jackson Arnold will too, and he could be the next face of the Oklahoma Sooners. That's just about to do it for this segment. Coming up next, we look at their rival, the other SEC newcomer in Texas, my guys. We'll be right back after this short break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.